The right. So hi everybody. If you've joined us, thank you so much. We're gonna wait a teeny bit for. I am thrilled to be here with Kate Hopeday and Claire Lombardo. I don't know how to move everybody around on the screen, so you're just where you are. Eventually, I'm going to shut myself off. What we have kind of sort of, I feel like really two powerhouse female authors. Kate has her first novel, If Then, and now In the Quick.
Oh, there they are.
Hold ourselves up, right? In the
I
Quick.
have yours.
In the Quick, chosen as a Good Morning America buzz pick, which was very exciting after I had already chosen it for everybody. So
it's like, where's my first one? There it is.
Oh, there it is.
And I actually will put in the chat, like I have like the link to the first book and things like that. So I'll put all that stuff in the chat as we go on. And Kate, I know, studied undergrad and then did a PhD in English in Pittsburgh, which is a city I know how to spell because I went to the Carnegie Mellon audition with my friend and there's like a song. Anyway. And Claire did undergrad at University of Chicago or University of Illinois at Chicago, and then did Iowa's Writers Workshop. And her first novel, The Most Fun We Ever Had, like was a kind of sort of instant hit. And I know one that I encouraged many people to buy all through the pandemic, and am super excited to have in a big stack on our paperback table now. And so Kate and Claire very much agreed to give their time, and they spent some time talking on their own. And I actually wish we could can do, though it's my first time and I'm afraid to mess anything up now. So I won't, like a little poll just to find out like who has actually finished one or both of these books. But I feel like you should go for it. No holds barred. Like, don't worry about spoilers, because I'm a firm believer of how it happens is almost a bigger part sometimes than what happens. And the how is in the beauty of reading both of your books. So there you go. So I'm going to see if I can put my screen off and then you guys take it away. And I think at about 7:35 or 7:40, depending on how things go, or earlier if we decide, we can move to some Q&A. So you guys can use the chat, and then there's an ask a question piece on the bottom, and then we'll kind of sort of I'll field questions for everybody at about 7:40. So
yeah, the ask a question is different from the chat. I just want to point that out.
Yes, so the ask a question, everyone, I see it in the middle at the bottom of my screen.
Yeah, it's like right
there.
Right there. Right
that worked on my screen.
It's like Brady Bunch, but we all see each other in the same way, right? All right, and so now I'm going to go off, I hope, and
thank you, Kira.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Great. Thank you guys all for coming as well. I'm excited to be here. How should we start, Kate? I have like a million questions I want to ask you.
Do you want to ask a question first, and then we can kind of go back and forth until we inevitably don't get to all of our
Great. Yeah, that sounds great. I want to lead with this just out of my own sheer curiosity, and it relates to a variety of other questions I have about your book. But I read in another interview that you did that part of your research for this novel was going to space camp as an adult. Can you please talk as much about that as you possibly can? Because I'm fascinated.
This is my favorite thing to talk about, partially because it's sort of embarrassing and somewhat funny, but yeah, I in preparation for this book, aside from having two kids who were space obsessed, and I had sort of, even before I started writing, we had been watching a lot of International Space Station YouTube videos. But beyond that, I read several memoirs, Scott Kelly's book about his year in space, a couple really interesting older Russian diaries of like Russian cosmonauts' time in Mir, and those were all great. And, documentaries, YouTube videos, all that stuff was fantastic. But I got it actually I was already in like a draft or two. And there were just a couple things that I just didn't have like the sensory. I just felt intuitively that I wasn't quite getting it right. And I really wanted that part to be right, because like bodily experience is so important for the book on so many levels. And so I did something pretty uncharacteristic for me because I'm an introvert. As a child, I didn't really like camp. I don't love like group activities. I'm also not like naturally gifted like June at like engineering and things like that. I have kids who are very sort of intuitively good at that stuff. And I am, I know enough to know that that's not me. And so I kind of was a strange fit for space camp, which tends to attract, and yes, adults can go. This is educators can go, but you can also just go as an adult who, you're just interested in it. Okay. So there are a lot of people who had science, engineering, math backgrounds, and this was like on their bucket list kind of thing. But yeah, I showed up and I was sort of bracing myself for the kind of like collaborative aspect of it, because that's very different, as you know, to sitting in front of your computer alone. Which most of the work of the book was like highly not collaborative, it's just sort of solitary. And I ended up having a lot of fun. It was very long days. So while it wasn't exactly the same as astronaut training, it did have that kind of like physical, you were kind of going on all levels from like 7 a.m. until like 9 p.m. And I thought it was going to be like an academic conference where you have like coffee breaks, and maybe it's a long day, but like you have breaks, and at a certain point you like go and have a drink, and there's like the evening part of it. Yeah. No, this was not that. We had like simulated training stuff the whole day, and then 8 p.m. would come around, and then we would have to do like a team building exercise, and we were all like, is there beer involved? Is there some way we can do this? No. We don't want to build a rocket. We want to like go just like chill out and have a drink or have a soda or whatever. So that part of it was it was kind of a lot, but what I gained, we got to do these kind of simulated training exercises, which are modeled on actual astronaut training. And one of them was, I think the thing that sort of piled up as the days went on was just how much failure is involved. And that is absolutely accurate to the way that astronauts are trained, and just how much failure astronauts face on the International Space Station as part of their everyday job. And we definitely got that experience. We had a simulated thing where we had to land a spacecraft, and it totally we all worked so hard, and we had these giant binders, and we were going through all the different maneuvers, and ultimately it crashed. We had to keep we were in mission control, and another crew was in on the International Space Station, and we had to keep them alive as they were running out of oxygen, and they died.
Oh no! Oh God! Okay. High stakes.
The part that really made its way into the book was I did get to do this simulated spacewalk. So I got to get into a real suit, and I had like these big kind of oven mitt gloves and these big boots. And the way they do it is, if you've ever seen Peter Pan in the theater, and the Peter's hanging from the ceiling with a long wire, and you're just kind of floating, and that's kind of how they have you do the simulated spacewalk, and you're above this decommissioned NASA shuttle, a real shuttle, and I had to kind of like float my way across it and do a repair and kind of float back. And so I had to figure out a way to like move without my feet on the floor. And it was deeply embarrassing because I was just sort of hanging there. But as I did, I finished the repair. I was successful in that part, and then I kind of sort of swam my way back, and I just had this like feeling of euphoria, even though it's so silly. I mean, I didn't actually do anything real, but That all those things, if you've read the book, you will know all those things made it into the book.
Yeah. And felt very like viscerally real. Like this is a book that has a lot. The sensory experience of reading this book is intense, which is why I wondered if you had sort of gone through simulations or because it is such a, there were moments when I felt like physically uncomfortable, and that's a compliment. We're allowed to give those kinds of compliments to other writers.
That was very important to me because so much of what I read about real astronauts, we have this idea from the movies that being an astronaut sort of floating through the air in this like pristine white uniform or spacesuit, and everything is modern and nothing is breaking down. And really, the International Space Station is like the total opposite of that. It's dirty. It doesn't smell great. Things are always breaking down. And it's physically very demanding, very, uncomfortable, very, you always have sort of things going on in your body that are like not dangerous, but not great, and are part of the challenge of being up there. And I was just really interested in that depicting that in that kind of like sensory way.
Yeah. That comes across really, really strongly. I have not had that experience. And I have never thought about being in space. But when I was reading your book, you suddenly start thinking about all of these sort of, just the physicality of it and the, how disorienting that has to be and terrifying, in a lot of respects. Yeah. And
the other thing I will say about space is it definitely showed me that I would be a terrible astronaut.
You'd be better than me, it sounds like.
But I'm still super fascinated, and I will always read any memoir that comes out. I'll definitely still read it. But I do know on a deep core level that I would be bad at it.
There's still time, I guess, time to learn. And can I ask a follow-up question? Like, where did you said your kids are space obsessed. Where did the seed of this book come from? Was it via their interest, or is it something that's always been kind of a preoccupation of yours?
I've always loved like at movies about astronauts and things like that. And I sort of two things came together. June, it's funny. Who knows if it actually was this way, but it feels like June just kind of showed up in my head one day and started talking to me. And, but if I kind of interrogate that, she has some qualities that are similar to characters that I really love in literature. The sort of quintessential example for me is Jane Eyre. These characters that you love them, but you're also kind of shaking your head at them. They kind of have a way of making things hard for themselves just by being who they are. And I had this character in my mind who had that quality. I mean, Jane Eyre is like an example, but there's a lot of great ones. I'm thinking of Arthur Less in the novel. Less is a great example.
Yeah.
TV Fleabag is definitely, you love her for who she is, and yet she's creating all these difficulties for herself just by who she is. And that kind of came together in my mind. A character that sort of causes problems for themselves came together in my mind with what was just going on around me, which was my kids. They wanted to learn about the Mars rovers, and we were watching these videos, and kind of the idea of like a very physically demanding environment combined with that sort of character got me sort of really excited to start writing.
Yeah. Interesting. Cool.
Can I ask you about the inspiration for the most fun we ever had?
Sure. Yeah. The most fun we ever had began as a short story about one of the daughters in the novel who has placed a child for adoption in her early 20s and then gone on to live this entirely other life, not ever thinking that the kid would come back. And I was just really interested in that. I was saying this, it's a fairly conventional fictional premise, like the man who comes to town, like the person who arrives and no one was expecting him. So I liked the thought of that as sort of a catalyst for for plot. But from there, I became more and more interested in the people around Violet, the character that I started with. And it just kind of kept growing and growing from there. But I was, I'm relating very much to what you're saying about characters who act against their own best interests, because that was so much of what propelled the most fun we ever had for me, is characters misbehaving or making bad choices, or doing things that are counterintuitive to wellness in a variety of ways. It's a really great tool to have in our sort of writerly arsenal, is people behaving badly because things just sort of...
They're like little plot generators, aren't they?
Absolutely, yes.
What I love about June is that I didn't really have to worry about plot in a way that I did with my first novel, because she just seemed to create, she just made things happen, because always sort of in conflict with the people around her and doing the thing that she shouldn't do, but she just had to do it. Yeah, it was in a way a more kind of joyful experience writing, which I know a lot of people do not have that experience with their second novel. But
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Well, it's great when you have like such a dynamic, and you get to spend so much time with June too. Like we meet her, she's 12 at the beginning, right? And then we sort of see her through to adulthood, which means that you had to spend that time getting to know, a pre-adolescent, and then getting to sort of reacquaint yourself with her as an adult. Was that difficult, or was it just kind of, did you grow with her as you were writing her?
I think I wrote a multi-point of view novel. That was my first novel. And so I was used to it. And you can understand this. When you would get sick of one character, you could go work on another one. And then it was always this great tool. If you didn't understand something about a character, you could always try looking at them from another person's eyes. And in your book, it's interesting. I think with Ryan in particular, you get this one view of him from his partner, and then you see him in another scene. I don't know, for whatever reason, this is popping out to me. And you see him from Jonah. Wait, what's the orphan's name?
Jonah, yes. I always forget every name. Yes, Jonah. I'm surprised that I remember that.
That was my first novel too. I'm like, was there someone named that? Oh, yes, there was. Jonah. You see him, Ryan, through Jonah's eyes, and then you find out all this information. And I just remember that being a great, just from a craft perspective and just from like a daily writing perspective, you could just kind of toggle from one point of view to another. And I found it, at a certain point, I realized I needed to just do that anyway. And it just it's not in the book. So I wrote a bunch of scenes from the aunt's perspective so I could understand June. And, maybe there's another way of doing that, but I found that was the easiest to do. I'd say the biggest challenge for me, I think, or not challenge, but maybe just difference, is I feel protective of June in a way that I didn't feel with my first novel characters. And I think maybe because I spent comparably less time with each of them, and that it was a book not just about one person, and I didn't follow them through their whole lives. It was like the book basically takes place over 10 days or something like that. So it's kind of just like a snapshot in time. But June, I just, I was with her for all her different stages. And so it's been different to have people read the book in a weird way, which I wasn't totally expecting. Yeah.
Interesting. What has been like, how are your readers responding to June as a character? Like, have you heard anything that surprised you or that you get defensive about? I'm sorry, my dog is...
I think generally people just love her so much.
Yeah, she's very lovable.
Or they're infuriated by her and they love her, which is that kind of like Jane Eyre thing for me. Sure. Or they just can't stand her.
Interesting.
That's just when you're kind of like, okay, well, this book is not for you. I mean, many people find Jane Eyre deeply annoying, and I get that. So yeah, and it's been kind of interesting. I sort of have this like impulse to kind of, well, there are reasons she is that way, as if she's a real person.
Me too. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. You get protective of them. you create these people, it's hard to see them get skewered or to
Yeah,
have
you're
people who
like,
don't
well, you have to understand this
think
about
about.
them. And maybe
Right.
because I wrote her when she was younger, I almost feel a little more like a little bit more motherly toward her, as opposed to my first book. Everyone was in their like 30s and 40s. They had jobs. Like they don't need me to like worry about them.
They're okay. Yeah.
But have you had that experience where people have like a very strong opinion about a character and you sort of want to
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I've gotten very like parentally defensive of my character. Like, and I think, you know, there's two of the sister, Wendy and Violet, who are the sort of oldest sisters, and they get the most page time. And I don't know if you're doing this during the pandemic. I zoom into people's book. Saying I zoom in sounds like I'm like on a rocket or something. I am not on a rocket. I'm just in my house. But I do that off. What's that?
with book clubs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I get these really, really sort of intense reactions. People either hate, or, you know, they hate one or the other, and they love. People sort of like I think people like to identify heroes and villains in fiction, even if you don't intend that in your writing. And I get really like, but think about her childhood. Think about this traumatic experience she went through. Like, I feel like I'm just constantly trying to make people feel more empathetic or something. But I also it's hard to, you know, we're alone in our spaces creating these people for years, and then they're just like I assume like sending a kid, you know, off into the world, like they're just out walking around and subjected to whatever's happening out there. It's difficult. Yeah.
It's the book that your readers, and I mean, in my opinion, the book then belongs to readers. Absolutely 100% believe that. But it's always interesting when you realize you're actually talking about two different books, because the book that you know is so different. Especially with my first book, I think because it was my first novel and I was like figuring out how to do things. I don't have an MFA, so I just basically like had read a lot of novels, and so I just taught myself how to do this with that book, and it went through so many drafts that whenever I'm talking with people about that book, I always realize that I have almost this like geological understanding of that book, and that I will never experience it the way readers do. And I'm almost like sort of jealous in a way that, and then of course, readers always come up with really interesting insights that just didn't even occur to you. And that's the wonderful thing about like doing the zooming into book clubs, is when someone tells you something and you say, oh my goodness, that's true.
Yeah. And I knew it all along. It was,
Maybe it was subconscious. I don't know.
Right. I know it's funny. Like those things that you can't take credit for, but you also like wrote the book, and you don't know if it's coming from some deep, it's bizarre. It is great. It's I feel like there have been a few times that readers have brought just like real left field, like, that was not what I intended. I don't want to talk about, but for the most part, it's like such a wonderful exchange of I don't know, of like information and emotional intelligence, and that's the nice. I mean, it's one of the many nice things about having readers. But yeah, it's funny. This is a selfish question, but I would like to ask you about your experience of writing a second novel in general. You just said, it's not an experience that most people profess to enjoy doing. Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sorry, I'm like interrogating you. I have so many.
No, that's a really good question. I feel like I want to have a conversation with someone writing their third novel, because that's the one that's proving more difficult for me. But then again, I am trying to write it during a pandemic. So
that adds
to myself and say that's the main issue. But I had sort of an interesting experience with this book, in the sense that I wrote the first sort of 30,000 words or so after I had thought about it for almost a year. I kind of made this deal with myself that I had to revise if then, and I didn't have an agent yet or any of that stuff. And I wanted to get that book done, but I had gotten to the point where I was pretty sick of it. So, sort of sick of looking at it, not feeling fresh, but I knew there were things I had to do with it. So I sort of made this deal with myself that I could start writing about June if I finished that revision. And so it was this actually pretty great motivator. And then once I actually sat down, I had sort of very free write, very kind of hot mess, but full of all kinds of weird, interesting, kind of very emotional things. I almost felt like I was downloading my brain or whatever. So I had 40,000 words of just not structured at all, but little bits of scenes and things I had been kind of playing in my mind, things that June had said to me, and it was all out of order. And then I had this sort of interesting experience of, I put it aside because I, signed with my agent for my first book and then went into edits with that book. And that I ended up with a 2-book contract, which was wonderful. But then I needed to come back to that book, this very strange thing I had written before I had any obligations to anyone else, before there were any expectations, before I knew who my editor was or had any relationship with my agent, and sort of come up with something that, would be like a book on a shelf, not a strange document that could be anything. When you're in that, I don't know, I don't know if this is how you felt and you can tell me, but before you know that the book is really going to be a book, you have a certain level of freedom. You also have a lot of anxiety about am I really a writer? And is this going to become anything? Am I just wasting my time? But you also, with that comes the sense of this can be anything. It could be anything. It could turn into anything. And so I had kind of both experiences. I had this strange document of 40,000 words. And then I had the expectation, a deadline, a person who's going to be reading it, 2 people, because my agent's pretty editorial, who are going to be reading it. And also people who were already invested. They had read maybe 40 pages or something. They were already invested in June in a way that was pretty strange to have other people what's going to happen with her? How are you going to, structure this? And luckily I'm a person who's motivated by deadlines, because I think if I wasn't, that it would be, I mean, I know some writers where that can almost become you freeze up it when there's too many expectations for what the book needs to be at a certain point. But I'm more of I want to get an A.
Me too. Yeah.
So
I relate.
it was actually pretty good for me. I mean, right now I'm writing and I don't have a super specific deadline, and it is harder to sort of generate that fear.
Right. You need to have a certain amount of fear when you're
motivator. Yeah. And just sort of an idea of a reader who has good taste and high expectations, and you want to write for them. I think for me, the reason that worked, I would say the number one reason that worked out, though, is that I had this very specific character who was already, in place, and she wanted things, and she was difficult, and she would cause these problems. And I think if I had a more amorphous project, I might have had a little more difficulty. But she was sort of firmly in those pages. So now I'm on the other side of it, and I'm sort of trying to write a book without all those things, and it is more challenging. Are you working on a second book, or is there a second book that's done?
There's a second book that exists in some shape, but I'm also working not under, I keep giving myself deadlines and then telling my agent those deadlines to hold myself accountable, and then blowing the deadlines. And she's she's not going to do anything to me. It's a very sort of, the only thing that
someone who's going to be like, you will be punished.
Right. I know. I want to be like fined or something if I don't.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Right. I know that's a good, money is always a scary thing to think about. But no, I do think that's part of what's difficult. Like when I wrote the most fun we ever had. I didn't even know I was writing a novel at the time. And it was just sort of like this fun thing that I was doing in my spare time when I had other jobs. And so that felt like its own sort of singular experience. But then once I had, a draft and I had a mentor in grad school who was working, like when you have that sense of accountability, like you said, like someone who's invested in your characters, who cares about what's going to happen to them. And then when you get sort of further and further into the publishing sort of machine and you have people who are thinking about it as a physical book on a shelf instead of just like a terrifying manifesto on your computer, that makes it easier. But when you're just alone in your house, especially in a pandemic, as you mentioned, which is like not, we can't avoid that. It's really difficult. I find it really difficult to focus. And I find it difficult to focus in many arenas of my life at the moment, but it's hard to sort of, it's hard to feel like you're not just writing into a void or something.
I think also now, I don't know for you, but I had all these tricks for kind of like getting myself over that kind of blah, whatever. You get in the middle of the book and you're like, oh, this is actually not very good.
Yeah.
And I would have all these kind of tricks, and they all involved things like going to a museum and staring at paintings and just doing like fill the well kinds of things, or taking a workshop, or going to see another writer, read from their book. And none of those things are available right now.
You can't do any of them. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that's available is reading. And I would say that's definitely, and I've been doing a lot of like listening to books while I go futz around in my garden or go on a hike, or I don't know, do something where I'm moving my body.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only thing that really that's available, that has been working for me. That, and I have a long-standing critique group that meets usually every week.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's nice.
And we were used to meeting on Zoom. So when the pandemic happened, we were all like, oh, well, we're still going to be doing this.
That's great.
But yeah, it's definitely been challenging to feel the energy, which I feel like is there. You just have to tap into it.
Harness it, or give it some sort of shape, or yeah. It's a constant. It's funny to think about. I feel like for the beginning, I don't know, the first several months of the pandemic, I was not reading a lot. And I sort of forgot how wonderful and invigorating reading is. And so I also, like, starting in the summer, I downloaded because I was going for these like insane walks. Like that's all you can do is walk around. And so I was going for these like hours long walks, which I now do like every day. But I think I downloaded an Alice Munro collection that I had already read, but I was just like, I just need to be reminded that stories can make me feel things, and that sentences can like move me. And since then I've been literate again, which is a gift.
I listened to all of Jane Austen at the start of the pandemic, and it was, I don't know, it was therapy.
Yeah. Was it all the same reader, or was it?
Yes, it's Juliette Stevenson, who was wonderful British actress who narrates a lot of books, but she has narrated, I think, all but Pride and Prejudice, and it's just just completely pleasurable. But also, as you're doing it, you're like, this is good for my writing. I'm learning. I mean, Jane Austen is wonderful for dialogue and structure and all kinds of things.
Yeah, totally.
Story, right?
Yeah, osmosis, or something is happening. Yeah.
I can't remember what Kira said about. I was just
gonna say, there she is.
I had like a million more questions I wanted to ask, but
I know you too.
You said Juliette Stevenson, and I was like, "That's my cue." Because she reads The Signature of All Things.
Yeah.
which is so amazing. I love her in general, but you said so many.
I listened to her reading that book. Yeah,
because that's an amazing book, right? So that's wait, why is her name escaping me? Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes.
Oh God!
Someone in the audience, save us!
Yeah, somebody help!
Everyone knows who we mean,
right? Elizabeth Gilbert.
So signature of all things.
Yes, Mary Ellen and Christina.
So signature of all things is right. It's kind of like a Victorian novel. And so it's very similar to so that's, I guess that's Juliette Stevenson. I mean, she has a large wheelhouse, but that's definitely, she's firmly there.
Yeah, she tends to.
When you just said, sorry, you were saying like sentences that move you, like remembering that, and I just feel like you guys said a bunch of really beautiful things, like that idea of filling the well, like those things that we do to kind of sort of fill us, to fill us and to fill our hearts and to fill our brains, especially when we're working on other creative projects. That intersection of creation is a really neat place. And even with the painting behind you, I don't know, I'm feeling that creative energy.
That's one of my, this is Mayumi Oda, who's one of my favorite. This actually lives somewhere else, but when I have events, I put her behind me.
Oh, nice.
That's very cool.
It's good to have a thing.
So we definitely have some questions. I also feel like making people more empathetic or like encouraging empathy is like what I do a lot in real life. So that was fun to hear at the beginning. So the first
four.
Yeah.
Right, so we have a couple of people who are asking about like specifically like your next project, both of you, like what your next projects are, and also people are asking what you're reading now.
Yeah.
So I don't know which you want to take for go.
Claire, do you want to answer that while I look at the stack on my desk?
Sure. Oh, sure. I was talking to Jennifer Weiner a couple of weeks ago, and right before we started talking, she said, before we went live, she said, I'm just going to warn you. And I like panicked that she was going to ask me something really weird. And she said, what you're reading, because I always forget that I've like ever read a book when someone, anyway, I have a few in my head. So you look at your stack. What am I'm working on another novel that is in some form and shape and is constantly changing. It is another character-driven novel. It's about a marriage that is quite different than the marriage in The Most Fun We Ever Had. And right now I'm listening to James McBride's Deacon King Kong as an audiobook, which is so terrific. It's such a like vibrant, wonderful, and really funny book. And I'm reading, I'm rereading. I've been doing a lot of rereading during the pandemic. I just started rereading Blue Angel by Francine Prose, which is it's real dark. It is about a creative writing professor who is trying to write his second novel, actually, and he's been trying for like a decade. And he meets this kind of terrifying student. And I will stop there because I don't want to spoil anything. It's good though. It's real dark, but it's those are my two. How about you, Kate?
So when I'm in a generating phase with my first with my third novel, and when I'm in a generating phase, I tend to like to read nonfiction. So I read a couple of things that are in this really cool sweet spot between memoir and something else. I read Why We Swim, which is a sort of cultural history of water and a memoir. And my new book has to do with water in some ways. And then a book that kind of just, I don't know, brought me out of a pandemic, just blues. It was Wintering, which I know it did for many, many other people, which is just a book that's very difficult to describe, but you should read it. And for me, as a person who is creative and then suddenly, and who was able to write every day before the pandemic, because I would write during my children's school hours, to go from that to my kids have been home for almost a year, and I've been in charge of their remote schooling, and I get to write maybe an hour a day, but usually not even that. And just the idea of that you can have these sort of when
Oh, she froze. I'm going to put the link for Why We Swim in the chat.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, that's okay. She'll unfreeze in a second, I'm sure. And in terms of questions, people were also asking what your favorite contemporary novels were.
Oh,
Can I unfreeze?
I'll let Kate jump back in when
Claire, tell us.
Sure.
I'm also going to put a link to one of your short stories that's available online. I'm going to put that in the chat also.
Oh, to mine?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. That's nice.
Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. I forget that short stories are my favorite fictional medium. I have such love for them. So thank you. That's really nice. What are some of my favorite contemporary novels? My friend Julia Drake wrote a really beautiful novel. It's a young adult novel that I'm completely blanking on the name of. Oh no.
I'll tell you. I'm looking.
Thank you.
Julia Drake.
Yes. I am so. Oh wait, The Last True Poets of the Sea. It's a long time.
Last Poets of the Sea. Oh
Yes.
yeah. Oh my God, I love that.
Oh, wasn't it wonderful? Yeah,
It's a great book because the children actually act like you imagine they would act. They're both like impulsive and empathetic, kind of sort of exactly at the right times.
Yeah, they felt like such fully realized. And I was talking to my students the other night about how hard it is to write kids, and how so often I have this thing just as a reader. I hate wise children in fiction. They drive me absolutely bonkers, because if you've ever met a kid, like kids are rife with non sequitur. They're often like quite, non-linear in their narratives. And then you have the kid who's like constantly like solving mysteries and uniting it drives me nuts. But the characters in Julia's novel are so they feel like real people. Yeah. It's also just terrifically funny. So that's a book I really loved. This is my sort of hard sell. There's a novel called The Innocents by Michael Crummey, who is a Canadian writer, and it came out from Doubleday last January. And it is I'm not selling it well, but it's a novel about two orphaned siblings, a boy and a girl, who live in like a cove on this remote island off the coast of Newfoundland in like the 1700s. Which again, not a great sell, but it's essentially this survival story about how these two burgeoning sort of teenage siblings sort of figure out how to move through the world. And it's one of the best books I've read in the last 5 or 6 years. I loved it. So that's.
I have it in the store. I can see, but I don't, unless the cover is very different in the paperback. I think I read it, but I'm not positive.
I don't know if they changed the paperback or not. But
they certainly did for your book, which is a really interesting. Like, did you have anything about that to say?
I really didn't. I didn't realize. So, my hardcover publisher is Doubleday, and Doubleday isn't. I'm sorry, my lighting is so weird. The sun is setting in my neighbor's window.
I can't get Kate back either. Well, go ahead.
I wish I'm like trying to reach into my computer to help her. I don't know. I don't know what to do.
I know. I've been doing it. I can't. But I don't know if anybody remembers, but the cover of Claire's the hardcover was the white one with the kind of ginkgo leaves on it, and they graduated in color, kind of sort of went from like a yellow to a green.
This is the German edition, but it has the same
cover. Yeah. And then this is the paperback cover, which is, I'm not sure what to think about either one in terms of, like, they both make you think about things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure one makes you think about the story than the other.
It's interesting. And the thing that I think is so interesting is it's the same designer who did both of them. So I know it's her name is Emily Mann, and she's many of the sort of beautiful covers that have come out in the last year. Emily is behind them. She's incredible. But the two, yeah, they're so different. And I think, the rationale for not moving over the ginkgo leaves is that they wouldn't translate well to sort of a flat cover, to like a paperback cover. The sparsity, I guess, wouldn't translate well. But I think, and I think Kira, you would know this better than I, but I think the aim of most paperbacks is to make them sort of more commercially appealing, right? Because they're more frequently sold. Maybe not. Maybe that's.
No, maybe I never thought about that.
I don't know. I feel like there's everything.
That would make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. I definitely think about books for my paperback table, especially in a different way than I think about them for the hardcover table. Like both, I'm usually, it's easier sometimes to buy a paperback than a hardcover, but any hardcover that I've loved, it's like, I can't wait to buy 1,000 paperbacks, because if I loved it in hardcover and sold it in hardcover, then it's so much easier for somebody who has a budget that's more of a softcover budget, or who wants like a hardcover and a softcover. And then I can just be like, and you're going to love this. Like, don't worry.
Yeah. There she is.
Yes.
I don't know.
That's what happened to me last night.
Oh my God, yay. We couldn't get you back.
We're glad you're back.
I don't know. It's like it just died, and then I had to go through the whole thing again.
Oh no.
Can you hear me
It
okay?
kept saying like entering.
You sound great.
I just wanted, it's not really a new book, but I continue to be obsessed with Lily King's Euphoria, and it's helped me write now 3 books. So
I just read that over the summer. It's fabulous. Yeah.
Isn't it so good?
It's so good. Yeah.
She's such a sensual writer, and I love all her books, but that one in particular, especially for In the Quick, just this idea of people figuring things out and the way she made that physical and sensual, super into that.
Yeah. I read that novel. There was a sort of massive storm that swept through the Midwest in the summer. And so there was like a 2-day power outage. And I shouldn't be saying this to like a massive audience because it's really embarrassing, but I had like a headlamp so I could see around my house. Right. And I stayed up until like 4 a.m. reading Lily King's Euphoria with a headlamp on because I couldn't put it down. It's a fabulous book.
On the topic, I don't know, you guys, if you'd move on from contemporary novels.
No, we were talking about. Can I ask you? Go ahead. Sorry, what?
No. I was my typing is very like I can't literally it's going one letter at a time. So if there's anything you guys want to put in the chat, you may be faster than I am.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Sure thing.
I just put Euphoria by Lily King on there in case people want to order it from Merritt Bookstore.
Right.
And I'll email everyone else.
That's a good option.
What were you going to say, Claire?
Well, this is a twofold question. We were talking about covers of books, and I wanted to ask you about, I was more curious. I'm curious about both, but I love the title of In the Quick. Can you talk a little bit, just briefly, about, did you start with the title? Did it come to you late? It just seems so fit. And you have the sort of etymological at the beginning, sort of all the different meanings. Yeah. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Very early on, I did a kind of, I don't feel like writing free write, which I like to do sometimes with my 2-volume Oxford English Dictionary. It's the one with the little drawer and it's got the magnifying glass. Yeah. And the words are so little, but I go in and I kind of try to find a word that speaks to me in some way, a keyword for the book. And I look it up and I look at its, etymology. And I started to think about quick in relation to June. She's kind of quick tempered. She has a quick mind. She also has this kind of soft underbelly. And I liked the quick also has that meaning and in terms of like the quick of your nail. And I really liked that idea, and it kind of hung around. And then astronauts have some really great slang, but they don't actually have slang for something that all astronauts worry about a lot, which is oxygen deprivation. And so I actually made up that term in the Quick.
Oh, okay.
Which is funny because apparently Random House did not know that until recently. Because my publicist was like, wait, that's not real. I was like, yeah, I made that up. It's a novel, so I'm allowed to do
You can
yeah, so very early on, it was kind of like when I would forget why I liked the book, I would go back to that definition and I would sort of like, okay, in the quick, that's like the feeling I want to have when I'm writing, and it's the feeling I want the readers to have. And so, yeah, that was super easy. Whereas my first book had like a gazillion titles and like none of them felt great. And, you know, I'm totally fine with the title, but I didn't have that sort of visceral feeling about it. But your title, was it part of the book from, you know, it's in the book. Was that from the beginning or?
No, actually, my book was called something else, almost like right before it got published. And then my editor called me and she said, "We have a problem. Everyone at Penguin Random House is calling your book that really long Chicago book. Like no one could remember the title." Which is not great for marketing. So she and my Lee Boudreau, who's my editor at Doubleday, we just went back and forth like for a couple of weeks. And I was.
Oh, it feels surprising and inevitable that.
Thank you. That's what we want, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. It was sort of we had this sort of epiphanic moment between the two of us because it was already, you know, the line came up in the novel several times. And I was actually resistant to having, I don't know, I've had the experience reading a book when the title shows up on the page. And most of the time when that happens to me, I'm reminded that I'm reading a book and I hate it. It like pulls me out. So I thought, what's that?
Sometimes it's like a little too cute.
Yeah. There's suddenly like the writer's in the room with you and it feels sort of creepy. So I didn't want to show up in someone's bedroom, like reminding them that I had written this book. We retooled it a little bit. It doesn't appear verbatim. I'm fond of it now though, but it was definitely I was really resistant to the idea of changing it because I was really married to the original title, which now I can't even remember, which is a good sign that it wasn't a good title. But I love like hearing, you know, that you have that moment of just when everything sort of converges and it's like you find the perfect name for, Yes.
I'm not really having that experience with the book I'm working on right now. And so I'm just kind of like, why can't it be?
Right. Yeah.
Quick. Like sort of if you have a title that's early on and it feels right, it almost can kind of like bring things together in your mind. And I don't know, it's a wonderful feeling when it happens. And I wish it happened every time.
Right. That would be really nice.
It would be really nice.
Mary Ellen in the chat just said it's like naming a baby, which is really true.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, it's true.
Kate, can you be specific, or either of you really, about any of the new things that you're writing, like when, where?
I didn't get to do that. I'm writing a novel that's set on the Oregon coast. And if you haven't ever been to the Oregon coast, it's not really the beach. It's very foggy and windy and the sea is very violent and there's sneaker waves and it's kind of a little bit, it's not like a relaxing sit on the sand sort of experience. It's more sort of like, it's sort of moody and dramatic. But the book is about a woman who is a paramedic and a mother and the family secret that she uncovers. And talk about right book, right time. I only recently read The Most Fun We Ever Had. And it's so nice when there's a book you need to read. And then it's also the book you need. I love it when that happens because it's a multi-point of view book. And I just, it's really helpful to read your novel and get back into that like family drama feeling out of outer space into earthly concerns.
Sure. Back to earth.
Yeah.
Cool.
And just thinking about
it's interesting. The one note I made, because I knew it was not going to be my conversation, the one post-it that I really kind of sort of like took out of the book and kept was this idea of a family and belonging and like how the pieces fall and how the people like pick them up and put them back together. And I felt like that happened in very different ways, but so actively in both of your books. And it's interesting to think about.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking about before we came on is that in some ways you could think these are the most two different books you could think of to put together in an event. But actually, they're both, I mean, to me, I mean, you can speak to it, Claire, on your end, but to me, they're both fundamentally about belonging and the kind
Yeah.
of families that we build, both chosen and is that what you have down? And I just
belonging is like literally like the top of my Post-it right there.
Oh, there it is.
Backwards.
Cool. Because a lot of times you get matched up with writers who are doing something just like genre wise and sort of, you know, on the surface, like doing something very similar to what you're doing. But I actually really love it when I get to talk to people whose books are, you know, really very different, but also there are these really interesting thematic resonance.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I very much agree. It's nice when that happens.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your new work, Claire, or no?
Claire, do you want to talk about, well, you said a little bit about
yeah.
I did.
Yeah, it's another it's the project I was working on as a graduate student, and it started out as a collection of stories. But there's not a market for stories, unfortunately. I mean, unless you're Alice Munro. So now I've sort of woven it in together into a novel. And yeah, it's about it's set. It's also set in Chicago. It started out being set in Silicon Valley, but I realized that a lot of the sort of research legwork I would have to do, I could not do because I can't go anywhere because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So I decided to write what I know again and set it in Chicago, which is where I'm from. I think that's all I will say for now, but everyone please cross your fingers that I finish it someday. Hopefully that will occur.
Why people aren't reading more short stories now, I don't understand.
I don't either.
It's like,
it does seem like
it seems to kind of sort of fit like what we have time for.
I know, it really does.
I keep
because
pushing them, so don't.
People are obsessed with podcasts and other episodic things.
Yeah. And if you have these weird spaces, like I feel like so many of our lives are segmented in these weird ways lately, where it's like you have 15 free minutes and you could, I don't know, it's been such a great, I found it a really nice way to sort of punctuate my work days. Like I'll just stop and read, you know, a John Cheever story that I know that I already love, just, you know, these things that, and you don't have to sit down and read an entire novel and then you can get back to work.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I also have done a lot of the pandemic rereading, and I think it's just a combination of comfort. So it sort of feels like self-care in some way, but also just, you know, some books I do feel like they just become like part of your bones and your blood, and they come out in ways that you don't even understand. And I found myself rereading things that I either studied in graduate school or I've already read a million times, like all of Austen, but and just, you know, you're reading at a different moment in your life, and it's like a different book in some ways. I'm rereading Daniel Deronda, which I wrote my dissertation on, and I feel like I forgot most of it, and now I'm reading it from this totally different perspective as a writer. And George Eliot's so interesting in terms of her writing process and things like that. I feel like it really feels like an entirely different book. This is a book I spent hours and hours with in graduate school. Anyway, I love rereading. I highly recommend it. Of course, you want to go out and buy new books from your local independent bookstore.
Of course.
You can reread. Everybody loses them anyway, or they've given them away. So people
it's so true.
Like, I buy my copy. Like I need it again.
I taught Read the Animals like 10 times because I keep giving people that book, and I'm just like, you have to read this or whatever. And I Capture the Castle, which is one of my all-time favorite novels. Yes, it's like a comfort read, comfort listen for me, but I actually do not own a copy because I keep giving it to people.
Yeah.
I'll send you that nice yellow one that Jenny Han wrote the introduction of, the yellow hardcover. Have you seen that one?
I don't have that one.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's out of, I mean, it's whatever's left is left. They're not reprinting it, but it's a great one. Well, I want to honor your time so much.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to say. Somebody asked, though, Rachel asked if anybody wanted to talk about their favorite short story collection, or if you just want to kind of sort of shout out some short story writers as our parting.
Yeah. Anything Alice Munro has ever written. I feel like I don't know, I love her so much. Child's Play, is a story, but it is in, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the title of the collection, but Child's Play is one of my favorite Alice Munro stories. She's wonderful. Who else?
I like Mavis Gallant a lot.
Oh,
I don't know if it's pronounced Gallant or
Jumbo Lakery's stories are a favorite of mine, and I used to teach them. I've taught it so much, and I still go back to it. Dubliners is a big inspiration of mine, which is, going back. Maybe we don't want to hear people who are dead, but
no,
I really like Diane Cook's debut collection.
Yeah.
What was it called? Man, some of those stories still are haunting me. I think of them. They're deeply disturbing in the best possible way. I'm trying to remember what it was called. That collection.
I can't remember at the moment, but someone else mentioned yes. And then have you guys read Diane Williams at all?
No.
I have.
Kind of what is it? Vicky, what is that? Anyway.
I'm writing that down.
Thank you both so much. And I feel like I want to say, please, can we come back together
the collection
at the next project?
Yes.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, this has been a total delight. The time flew by, which is also, yeah. Yeah, I would love that.
I would love it. So in a couple of years, maybe we can reconnect.
That will be our accountability, Kate. That's how we have to finish our books. The promise of future reward. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So much. And anybody who's here, thank you for coming. And we will, I'll put something up on the website by tomorrow morning with some of the different things we've been talking to. And Claire and Kate, if you want to just email me anything you didn't remember.
That are, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I will.
Totally. Hardcover, paperback. No worries. Right. That's actually a nice mix.
Yes.
When someone has a paperback and there's a hardcover.
Yeah.
That's also because it's totally different kind of sort of markets in some ways, but it's a lot of times the same readers. So I was really thrilled to
love a paperback. I'm such a paperback writer. I know I should say the opposite.
No, it's okay. We just have to say what's truth, and that's how we're going to move.
There you go.
So thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
I'm scary to hit that end thing, but I'm going to hit it. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.